All right. Welcome everyone to the first traffic calming meeting for Colfax Drive. This is in NDOT's Neighborhood Street Traffic Calming Program. We're meeting tonight virtually only on November 25th, 2024, here at 6 p.m. My name is David Greaves. I work with NDOT on this program, and I'll be facilitating this meeting tonight and taking any questions and such. So we're gonna briefly overview kind of the program as a whole, and then we'll talk about some of the tools and design options that the traffic calming program has. And then we're going to take a closer look at kind of the first draft that we've done for Colfax Drive. Then, of course, hear from everyone on the phone about any feedback you may have, other ideas, especially things that you'd like for us to know when we go out and do our field visit and ultimately put together a final design. And then we'll finish up by talking about kind of the next steps in the timeline for a project like this. But to go way back to the beginning, we'll start just by what is traffic calming. This is a neighborhood program that focuses on residential streets. So you won't find us on kind of the larger, more commercial corridors or anything with, like really high posted speeds or high amounts of traffic. This is a program that focuses on physical solutions to encourage lower speeds over significant lengths. And then the primary goal of this program is speed reduction for vehicles. And we'll take a look at why that's an important goal in just a minute. Before that, there are 3 E's of traffic calming. That's education, enforcement, and engineering. We have engineering bold and underlined here because that's the component that NDOT has the greatest ability to directly affect on a street like yours. Certainly, we do education. This meeting is an example of one of many ways that NDOT tries to communicate a culture of safety in Nashville on our roads. And then there's also enforcement, which is the purview of Metro Nashville Police Department, who of course are tasked with enforcing all kinds of laws and dealing with really a lot of duties. So while we would love for them to be able to enforce all streets at all times, that's not what we want to rely on for a project that we would like to be working 24/7. The reason why speed reduction is the primary goal of this program is because it ties directly to NDOT's overall goal of Vision Zero. And Vision Zero essentially is a strategy to achieve 0 deaths and serious injuries on Nashville's roadways. Where speed factors into that is demonstrated by the diagram toward the bottom of the screen. So what we see is when a vehicle is traveling at 25 miles an hour, if it strikes a pedestrian, that person will have an 89% chance of survival. However, that likelihood of surviving starts to go way down as the speeds increase. So toward 45 miles an hour, if a person was struck by a car going that fast, they would only have a 35% chance of surviving. So that's why in neighborhoods where we know people, want to walk on their roads, keeping the speeds appropriate for that context is really important and has a direct effect on safety overall. This is a really popular program in Nashville. So when Colfax was selected in August of 2024, there were around 575 neighborhood streets in the queue. So the map we're looking at to the right is Davidson County, and every line on that map is a traffic calming project in one stage or another. So all of the purple lines that we see are streets who have applied but not yet been selected. In the fall of 2024, we were able to choose 25 neighborhood streets. We do that once every 6 months. So y'all were near the top of that list of streets needing treatment for speeding. Um, so before we talk about tools, I want to make sure everyone is aware that if there's anything that we aren't able to address with this type of project, Hub Nashville is a resource available to all of us to make requests for um, kind of anything that you may like to see from Metro Nashville. It can do problems with
Mm.
trash, potholes, requests for traffic treatments, debris in the roadway, really anything that one interfaces with Metro about and can be found on Hub. Um, I want to take a second to just kind of pause and see if anyone's got questions on what we've covered so far.
No, I don't, not yet.
Great. Um, so to break
We
down a
do get
little,
a lot of people on our road that walk children in, in strollers and walk their dogs and their pets and just walk alone, actually. And we do have a speed limit sign posted. I think it says 25 miles an hour. But of course, it does unfortunately get overlooked by a lot of drivers who use Colfax as a cut through road to get to Elm Hill Pike quickly.
mhm.
So this is encouraging for me, at least. I'm very pleased with the idea that we're going to get the speed reduction bumps.
I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, and we can talk about those in a little more detail in just a minute. Um, right now, I'm going to cover how that list of those over 500 streets is sorted.
Uh
Um,
huh.
and then we'll move on to the tools and the concept ultimately. So the way that these projects are prioritized is a formula that takes into account measured vehicular speeds. That's the largest chunk, 45% volume. So that's the number of vehicles driving on your street every day. Those two combined are what we see kind of creating the danger that people are exposed to. So certainly if vehicles aren't driving particularly fast or there are only a few of them, that correlates directly to the amount of exposure pedestrians would have to speeding and that kind of hazard. But then there are a few other factors that we like to consider as well. So the third highest is crash history. So if any pedestrians or bicyclists have been struck, I think in the last 5 years, we would want to know that and certainly consider it as a factor in that prioritization formula. And then non-driver accommodations is really asking, do you have sidewalks in your neighborhood? And if you don't, we know that people still need to walk, and ultimately they would be sharing space with vehicles, making it all the more important to make sure they're traveling at safe speeds. And then that last 5% is trip destinations. So we like to consider whether or not there are things like parks and schools and libraries nearby, because those are generators of pedestrian trips. And if we know there will be pedestrians around. That's something that we like to take note of and weigh in that formula. Some of the data that we collected about Colfax was you had a volume of 470 vehicles per day. That sounds like a lot, but in the traffic calming world, that's actually on the lower end. We'll do streets that are up to 5,000 vehicles per day. The 85th speed, I think, is what really set you all apart. We measured that at 40 miles an hour, which is one of the highest we've seen in the program. So that was probably the factor that gave you the most points on that prioritization. And it certainly underscores to us that if people are regularly exposed to that kind of speeding, that's something that we would like to address. You do have a fairly narrow street, so 20 feet of pavement is right around that minimum amount that a two-lane roadway can safely be. And we'll kind of take a look at how that'll affect some of the options we have in a few minutes. This is a map of Colfax Drive. So the section that was applied for was looks like from Old or Allen Road down to Elm Hill Pike. There are also a couple of other projects in the neighborhood. So Emery Drive was also selected recently, as was Lakeland Drive. Um, and then, of course, the other sides of those are an older project that has been installed already. So there are some installed vertical measures in this neck of the woods if anyone would care to see them in person, kind of know what you can expect when they're put in. So moving on to the program's toolkit, the device that NDOT uses most often in the traffic calming program are called speed cushions. So these are modular rubber devices. They're designed to act like speed bumps, but with a higher target speed. So that's why they're stretched way out, whereas normal speed bumps are only a foot or two long. These can come in lengths of 7, 10.5, or 14 feet. They have gaps in between them in order to reduce the impact to emergency response vehicles. So basically, a fire truck will have a much wider wheelbase than a typical car, and so it can come a little closer to straddling these without having to slow down to the speed that we're asking, regular vehicles to drive, because we know they're in a hurry, and we certainly don't want to impede them
Hmm.
addressing emergencies in Nashville. Similar to these are speed tables. So these are made out of the exact same material, just in a different configuration. And you'll notice the difference is it stretches all the way across the road. Um,
Wow.
for the emergency vehicle impact, we try to not use these on roads that would serve as a potential cut through for emergency traffic. Usually we'll only bring these out in scenarios where we can't really get a cushion design that we're comfortable within. It's maybe an odd width or something like that. But we do see these around from time to time. It's not like they're unheard of in Nashville. They're just not necessarily the first choice. The reason that these two put together are the preferred method for NDOT, among other tools, is that we know that vertical measures have the desired outcome. So there's national research that goes back to the 90s that basically predicts that these do work for speed calming effects. NDOT's actually conducted their own study in order to verify that in a context like Nashville's, they work here as they do in other places, and they found results that were really similar. So what we're viewing here is the data from that study, where before and after, the average speed on the streets combined came down from 31 miles an hour to 22. And then the 85th percent speed came all the way down from 37 miles an hour to 25. Those results were really encouraging because most of the projects we do are sort of in that second bucket where that 85th percent speed is really high. And we're looking for it to be much closer to the posted speed limit. Um, there are instances where we're not able to do vertical measures in all of the spots. We ideally would
Hmm.
like to. Basically, we try to shoot for a pretty even standard spacing with speed cushions, and given hills and grades, curves, things like that, it's not always achievable. So in addition to the vertical measures we talked about, we have a few other things that we mix into designs as well to help with more specific situations. One of those things is radar feedback signs. I think we've all seen these before, but essentially it's a solar powered device that will read one speed as they approach the sign and then show it back to them before they get past. So ideally, it would serve as a reminder like, hey, speed limit's 25, you're going 40, maybe you should slow down. Um, Importantly, these don't do any enforcement, so they don't take pictures of the people speeding. No one's getting like automatic tickets. It's purely just information for the driver to react to. Because it's not a physical measure necessarily, like it doesn't actually affect the vehicle as it's driving down the road. Um, We see some speed reduction, but not quite as much as the vertical measures um, have been observed to have.
Mm.
We can also do what's called pavement narrowing. So on streets that are pretty wide, maybe have some excess pavement out on the shoulders, um, those can feel more comfortable to drive at higher speeds than narrow roads. Basically, if you
Huh.
have more room for error, um, like maybe if you were on the interstate or a large collector road like Elm Hill Pike, um, it's easier to drive quickly without necessarily even noticing. So one thing we can do in those situations are paint white edge lines on the sides of the road, and that can have kind of the two effects of psychologically narrowing the road and making that speed come down just a little bit. But it can also increase the comfort for pedestrians in neighborhoods without sidewalks because you can walk on the outside of the line and feel a little more confident that a driver on the inside of the line is going to, kind of stay in their space and then you stay out of it. Certainly, it doesn't stop a vehicle from veering outside of the lines, but it does encourage safer driving that way. Similar to narrowing, but as applied to large intersections, we have bulb outs. So when we come to intersections that have a lot of excess pavement, like the one that you can see kind of in the top left, we know that vehicles are able to take those turns at really high speeds. Kind of imagine the difference between like merging onto an interstate where you have a really long sweeping curve that you can travel comfortably at a high speed versus turning into your driveway, for instance, where you have to slow way down to take that really tight turn. These try to be somewhere in between. So we want everyone to be able to use the intersection as intended. We really just want to make sure that they're going at an appropriate speed while they're making turns. And that has safety benefits because it gives a person more time to look at the crosswalks and see, is somebody trying to walk there? Am I going around this curve slowly enough to react to things that may surprise us? They do have a side benefit of preventing illegal parking close to intersections. So in the bottom right corner, this image is kind of that application of bulb outs where in neighborhoods
Oh.
with really high street parking demand, people may be incentivized to park a little closer to the corners than is allowed. And that has a safety detriment by blocking the view of a driver turning onto a street and a pedestrian using that crosswalk. So when we apply bulb
Mm.
outs here, it's called daylighting the intersections and really just making sure that we leave enough space for everyone to see each other as we're sharing the road. Um, on wide roads, we can do something called chicanes, where we basically stripe a center line in the road, but zigzag it back and forth, usually alternating with on-street parking. This is two images of Fairfax Avenue in the Hillsborough Village neighborhood. Um, and these work similar to bulb outs by basically forcing turns along the length of the roadway, and that way people aren't able to kind of get a really fast sort of straight shot. Um, Generally, when we drive straight, we can see way far ahead of us and we're comfortable going quickly, and it just may result in going a little faster than maybe we intend. The main downside of this is in neighborhoods that have a lot of on-street parking demand, it can take away some of the spots available as
Mm.
the roadway kind of alternates back and forth. I will say 20 feet is not enough to do a strategy like this, so we aren't proposing chicanes on Colfax for that reason. And then lastly, we have traffic circles. These basically work like bulb outs, but narrowing the intersection from the inside out rather than from the outside in. They work similar to roundabouts, where if you were wanting to make a left turn, you'd start by going right and kind of go all the way counterclockwise around the circle. And these are really helpful in wide intersections, particularly where there is stop control that just isn't quite working super well. So it's something that we can apply in certain situations, but there is a lot to consider when we design these, and a lot of intersections are not big enough or have weird angles. So they're applied sparingly in Nashville. So that was the last of the tools I have to talk about. We can move on to look at the concept we have for Colfax, or if anyone has questions about any of the tools we've covered before we move on, happy to do either of those.
Well, our particular street doesn't have sidewalks. I assume it's because of the fact, like you said, it's somewhat narrow, and also because um, the other side of Colfax that doesn't have any houses is owned by, the airport
Mhm.
that purchased out the homes many, many, many years ago and had them removed. They do mow over there and they keep that part of it neat for the most part, but I'm assuming that's why we don't have sidewalks or, um, bike lanes or any of those things.
Well, that's a really good point too. That was something that I was going to bring up once I saw the proposal. But my main concern if we're doing something like the traffic bumps, the speed bumps, is people tend to try to skirt around those things, and we have an entire side of our street that essentially would just almost force them further into where the pedestrians walk to get around them.
Yeah, that's an excellent piece of feedback. So I guess I'll start by saying I've switched over to the concept that we're proposing. It of course is open to your feedback. We need to do a site visit, make sure we fully understand the roadway and everything we talk about tonight, and then we'll talk about how we might move on from there. But yeah, basically, we're proposing 4 sets of speed cushions, stretching from the edge of the road to the edge of the road. The hope is that we would not have people drive off of the road to get around them. However, when we encounter situations where we suspect that might be a concern, what we do is add more signs to these. So if that was something that you all suspect would happen, and we'll probably observe this on the site visit as well, if this is like a flat kind of grassy area that would be traversable by a vehicle, we may recommend putting the warning signs for the speed cushions in a position that would not allow them to easily be driven around. Certainly if this is like a really big lawn and they wanted to go like all the way off the road and around the sign, people do crazy things, but I would think the vast majority of the people would not find that to be a faster alternative. Um, but I appreciate you bringing that up because it is something that we want to know before we finalize the plans. To address why there aren't sidewalks on this road in particular, I think it comes down much more to just the style of development that was occurring when most of the neighborhood was built. So just on this aerial image, we can see that hardly any of the streets in this part of Nashville have sidewalks.
Mhm.
So NDOT would love to build sidewalks wherever we can, but that is there's a really large list of streets that would like to have them, and it's a kind of project that can get really expensive when we consider, where does the stormwater go when it runs off the road, and considerations like that. So in the interim, we want to make sure that on roads where people do share the pavement with vehicles, those vehicles are going at an appropriate speed to share that space. Um, So a little bit more about the design. I mean, it seems like y'all are relatively familiar with speed bumps and how they work, but basically what we tried to do was space these out such that there's a couple near the beginning and the end, depending on how you approach the road. And then we had space for 2 more in the middle. This was a street that maybe we could have fit 5, but the issue with fitting in a 5th is that it would be placed like directly on the steepest part of Colfax, and we weren't able to place it there. So 4 is about as many as we can do. If we were to go down to 3, we'd kind of run into that same problem where the middle one would be right on that hill. So then we'd have to either decide, does it go at the top or the bottom? And essentially what we're thinking is this is about the right number for the intended calming. But does anyone have questions or other thoughts?
Well, what are they laid on the ground with? I mean, are they bolted into the ground or are they
Yeah, they are. So
glued
essentially,
or?
yeah, basically, if you can, and I'll go back to the speed cushion bit here. Yeah. So look at the bottom left image. You can see that
Okay.
each of these is made up of, it looks like in this case, 12 individual pieces of rubber. And each of those
Oh,
has 4 bolts, 1 in each corner. So, well, it looks like one big object. They're actually kind of an assemblage of many small ones. And ultimately,
hmm.
yeah, they're just we put them down, drill holes into the asphalt, and then anchor them in.
And they
So
have holes in them for water to go through?
no, they don't have any drainage
Oh,
built in, but essentially what happens is water as it's running along it will go around. They're shaped like little mounds, so water runs off of them really easily. And because all of the edges are flat and we don't tend to put them on steep hills where water is going to be running really fast, drainage
okay.
typically isn't a problem with these.
And what about in the winter, like when we had like last year we had quite a prolific ice, an amount of ice. What about when the like salt or really the ones with the plows, the plow trucks? How do they deal with those? Like,
Yeah, so the plow operators are folks we've actually worked pretty closely with. We thankfully had put down several installations of cushions on plowed routes right before that big snowstorm we had last winter.
yeah.
And we were able to find out that they did not have too much trouble picking up the plow and kind of hugging it as it went over. And then the good
Oh,
kind of the bonus of these is they're black and rubber. So out of everything on the whole street, these will melt first because they attract the sunlight and heat up a little quicker than like a lighter asphalt or concrete might.
oh.
So typically we have not experienced a lot of issues with these in the wintertime, thankfully.
Mm-hmm. And he said something about possibly putting up more speed signs, because I know there's one when you first turn off Elm Hill onto Colfax that says 25 miles an hour. But that's only been there like a year maybe now. We had to almost beg, steal, and borrow to get that thing put up.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear that it did go in. It's unfortunate that it doesn't seem to have done the whole job. Um, Typically, we won't install more speed limit signs in addition to traffic calming projects, but we do have signage. And let me see if I can find an example.
I've seen ones that
Yeah,
say like speed bump ahead or no, speed cushions ahead or something like that
yeah. So if you
on
take
some
a look.
other streets.
Yep, yep. So if you take a look at the top left image, those are the
Okay.
signs that we'll typically use. And essentially the idea is we don't want to surprise anyone with these. So that's
Right.
why we don't put them on sharp curves and things like that. So we want everyone to know they're about to go over speed cushions. And they say speed cushion in that kind of warning yellow. and then an advisory speed of 20 miles an hour. So that doesn't mean the
Right.
speed limit is 20 miles an hour. It's more just, the most comfortable speed to go over these is about 20. You're not going to experience any, like major negative effects if you're going 25 or
To your
30.
vehicle, right?
Yeah, but that discomfort of going over them starts to increase quite dramatically as you get higher up into the 35, 40 mile an hour range.
Mm-hmm. And are these, you said about the emergency vehicles, can buses straddle them as well?
They can, yeah, and no vehicle can like completely miss them. There's not
Oh,
exactly a
okay.
sweet spot, but they have these kind of tapered edges where the wider your wheels are, the lower the height they have to go up and down. So when we
Uh-huh.
do have bus routes, what we try to do is a configuration kind of like the top left here, where we make sure the cushion is in the middle of the lane.
Okay.
And that way a bus wouldn't have to like veer into the middle of the lane to straddle a cushion. It can just stay in its lane and go over it that way.
Okay. What's the life expectancy of a speed cushion?
That's a great question. I'm pretty sure their warranty is around 15 years. So if they started to deteriorate before that, they could be replaced. Um, we have not had any speed cushions in Nashville installed long enough to kind of like find out the hard way, like, oh, these have completely worn out. And the
Mm-hmm.
program has been going on for quite a while. But these are intended to be permanent installations. So if they were to wear out and you know the neighborhood continues to want them, they would be replaced as just the same kind of regular maintenance we always do. Even the asphalt is replaced on a pretty regular cycle, ideally.
And so if something were to happen that they had to dig up our road and replace and repair it, you would automatically replace the speed cushions, or would those have to be reapplied for?
No, it would be automatic, and that's actually happened in my neighborhood right now. So
Oh, okay.
they're replacing all of the water lines where I live, and basically all you have to do is unbolt it, put it to the side, and then when it's time to put it back, you just rebolt it on. They're pretty flexible in that regard, which is nice.
How long does the installation take?
That's a great question. The components themselves are really fast. So we've seen installations go in as short as like a week or a few days. Um,
Oh,
there are different crews that will do different parts. So sometimes we've seen like maybe the signs go up a little early, and then the actual cushions come in after a little bit of time. So the like full complete project from start to finish is not always so fast, but the construction time is very quick because it is such a modular and kind of simple tools involved to put these in. You don't need like massive machines or anything like that.
and you said we're going from Elm Hill Pike from the corner there to where on Colfax
Allen
Road?
Road.
Allen Road. Okay. Okay.
Do you guys set up like how you guys originally took all the information? Like, do you monitor it after you've installed the speed bumps to get information after?
That's a great question. So beyond the original study that NDOT did to determine whether or not these worked in the general sense, we have not done a lot of monitoring of recently installed projects. However, it is something that NDOT is currently working on designing kind of a regular evaluation program that might give a more expansive report on how these installations are going. So we're almost certainly not going to monitor every single street because we do a lot of these projects per year. But we are going to try to essentially choose a representative sample to um, to evaluate and just kind of double check and continue to understand how these perform in Nashville.
Well, it kind of goes back to what Rachel had brought up about people going around them in the grassy area. So are you guys going to put those signs up next to the speed bump immediately, or is that something we'll need to give feedback back to you guys on? Like, how would we go about that?
So I have heard from you all that that's something that is a concern. I pretty strongly suspect that when we go out and do our site visit, we will also observe that that's a real possibility. That will influence our design such that we'll put those signs next to the cushions to prevent that behavior. So on some neighborhood roads, maybe where there are like curbs or large ditches, things that make it less easy, we don't always put signs at every set of cushions. But if we feel like that is going to be part of a complete design that functions as intended, then we will do that.
Yes, because I'd say you said we had on average 470 vehicles a day, and I'm home a lot as I'm retired, and every single day, and I do mean even in the winter and the rain, there are people walking, bicycling, babies being pushed, dogs being walked. You know, even my cats go out in the front yard, and I dare say they go to the road. Um, you know, I hate for them to become a hubcap cover, but there is a lot of traffic, and not to mention the wildlife, because we even have deer that come across. People slow down on the road just because of the deer.
Oh my. Well, that's certainly great to hear that people are getting outside, walking around now. It does let us know that this is a project that will hopefully be impactful and improve the environment where those people and animals spend their time. So yeah, we're excited at the possibility of doing a project like this here.
Now, the warning stripes on the actual cushions themselves, like those arrows, are those
Mhm.
something that has to be repainted every so often, or brightened
Um,
back up, or how's that?
so if I understand correctly, they are not painted, but they're
Oh,
like a plastic reflective kind of like fused on material.
oh,
Um, so they do stick around for quite a while. If they do fade, as you know, we know that pretty much anything we put on the road doesn't last forever. Um, we would always welcome hub requests to let us know, like, hey, this one's looking a little tired. Can you check it out? The good news is we do have the signs that kind of serve as the backup for those stripes. So we want to do everything we can to make sure that people know these are there when we're driving over them.
are these more cost effective than the old fashioned um, speed bumps made out of tar and asphalt?
Oh, that's a good question. I strongly suspect they are. I haven't seen the actual like numbers to that because NDOT has been using the cushions so regularly. I do know that when we try to make these out of asphalt, it's really hard to get them as consistent as we like to see on citywide projects like this. So
Uh-huh.
it's reasonably straightforward to get a road nice and flat. But as soon as you try like sculpting shapes in the asphalt, it's not quite as simple to get a consistent experience. So you wouldn't necessarily know, is this a big one? Is it a small one? We like these because they're all exactly the same.
And they basically mold to the shape of the road because you're laying, because it's got
Oh
some
yeah,
flexibility.
exactly. They're made out of rubber, so
Right.
they'll kind of be able to follow the slopes of the hill if there are any.
Gotcha.
Um,
Sound
Next up in the presentation is kind of the timeline for how this project could proceed. We can definitely come back and continue talking about anything we've covered so far, but I want to make sure we keep moving. So what we're looking at is a flow chart of every step that this street will go through, starting, of course, with the application that was submitted. We then did our prioritization and data collection process that resulted in Colfax being selected. We are here tonight at the neighborhood meeting that we've advertised through mailers, where we covered the toolbox and the concept. After this meeting, what we're going to do is a site visit where we kind of review all the conditions in the field, make sure that there's no surprises for us that we weren't able to see from Google Street View and Google Earth, all that. And then take the feedback and that information and refine it into kind of a final concept design. We can either schedule a second neighborhood meeting, or we can publish the plans online and just go straight to the voting. Basically, if we were to make any like major changes, or you all were looking for something a little bit different than what we've proposed so far, the second neighborhood meeting is kind of a good time to like revisit the design, see what's changed. You know, there's a lot of reasons why one might be necessary, but if you all are feeling like you'd rather just kind of move straight to that online ballot and then ultimately get to the construction, we can do that as well. It is up to you all, so feel free to kind of let me know if you have a preference. We'll try to decide by the end of tonight's meeting which of those directions we want to take. But that's sort of how this project will move forward. And then next, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of the specifics of that online ballot and construction process. But I guess I'll just kind of leave the floor to all of you. Is there a preference on whether or not a second meeting is desired?
Will we get to see the final design that you
Yes.
guys come up with?
Yeah, so should the second meeting not be scheduled, what happens is we post the plans on NDOT's website, and then the postcard ballot will direct you to the plans. So you'll see like the construction drawings essentially, and then get to decide, yeah, I think this looks good, or no, I'd rather this not be installed.
So if we get our postcard and we look at it and we don't like it and we notify you, then we have a second meeting online?
No, once we send the ballots out, that voting will have started and we'll decide one way or another.
Okay. Okay.
But I am happy to, if there's any other feedback on what we've got here, we can talk about it. Like right now, I haven't heard anything from you all that would make us like drastically deviate from a plan kind of like this.
Mhm.
But certainly that doesn't mean we're not here to listen to other thoughts.
I definitely think, I mean, the more the merrier as far as the speed bumps go. I mean, you saw the average speed of people that come through here. It's kind of crazy, especially compared with all the wildlife we see. I mean, we have deer every single night that I see on the Ring camera that come and
Yeah.
eat the yard
Yes,
and
we
stuff
do.
like that. So I definitely can see. I mean, I think 4 is a good number. Obviously, I prefer to have more, but I also understand that you can't put them on an incline because then you're surprising somebody that's coming over the hill or and whatnot. So I mean, I think it looks about as good as it could get, to me at least.
Great.
And if we're only going from Elm Hill to Allen, I don't know if they've already got 4 that they're planning to put in that they'd be squeezing in a 5th if they even were to try. It'd almost be like then you weren't moving past 20 miles an hour at all.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was thinking as well. We shoot for between 300 and 500 feet spacing between these. You all have that hill kind of in the middle of the road, so the gap
We
between
do.
those middle two, I think, is around 450, which I think that we can expect traffic to be a pretty reasonable speed if we were to install a design like this.
So at what point would that online ballot be posted, assuming we say we don't want a second meeting, then you guys will go into design for a couple months, and then here in like 2 months we would have a 6-week window open for voting?
Yeah, we estimate around 2 months from tonight as the amount of time it takes for us to visit the site, take our observations, and produce those construction drawings. Um, that can vary. So we're kind of headed into holiday season. It may be slightly longer, or might be not as busy because of the holidays, and we have a little more ability to get to this one quicker. But 2 months is the approximate amount of time.
And everybody on our street would receive, like from Allen to Elm Hill, everybody on Colfax Drive will receive a mailer, and then that's how they'll vote.
That's an interesting question. The answer is maybe. Basically, the way I know, not as cut and dry as we'd all like. So we use the same way of reaching everyone that the planning and zoning department does. So if there were like proposed zoning changes in the neighborhood, basically we use their tool to reach all of the owners of these properties and send them to the address that they have on file. So most of the time, that is just where the person lives, and they'll get their ballot sent to their house. However, if the address recorded in the Register of Deeds office is maybe a different place, that's where that mailer would be sent. So it is a little bit finicky, just given the data we have to work with.
So the renters don't get it.
Exactly. So should anyone
Yeah.
renting want to weigh in, they're certainly welcome to come to the meetings and let us know their thoughts. We also like to let them know, just feel free to talk to whoever does own the property, let them know, hey, I think this would be great for the neighborhood. But ultimately, those who are owning these parcels will get the ballot card and code and submit their vote that way.
So what about the business on the corner, the Nicole Marie hair salon beauty thing of it all?
That's
I
a
don't even know if she's Elm Hill or she's Colfax, but you she got a driveway, you can go in either way.
yeah. So every property that touches the affected right of way is considered.
Okay.
However, businesses are not eligible, and the reason for that is
Okay.
we're really focused on the like neighborhood aspect of the street, and we do invite the businesses, churches, schools to the meeting. Certainly, we're fine with hearing feedback, but when it comes to the voting, essentially it's the owners of the residential properties on the street will each get one vote.
Gotcha.
I think we covered pretty much everything on the balloting. The one piece is that in order to pass, 66% of those who respond need to respond yes. So it's not 66% of the whole street, just of the people that vote. We're looking for 2/3 to approve the project.
So, for example, if only, just say, I'm sure more people vote, but if only one person votes, then that's 100% correct. So, like, not voting doesn't count as a no, it's just as a basically no response.
That is correct. Thankfully, we have not encountered that extreme of an example. This is a pretty short street, so I wouldn't expect to have tons of votes come in. We usually average between 10 and 20% of those that get the mailer will submit a vote. But you are correct. It's not. You can vote yes or no, and those are the votes that are considered. If you don't vote, that is not a no. Any other questions about the balloting, design, really anything else? I've got my contact information up here on the screen. Oh, go
Once
ahead.
we all vote, then you just notify us it's a go.
Yeah,
Or
so we will, after 6 weeks, when the ballot closes, and on the postcard, you'll see like the specific date that you need to vote by. It'll be like open for 6 weeks or so. Once the ballot closes, we count all of them, and then the results will be posted to NDOT's website, either pass or fail, and how many or like what percentage of people voted for or against.
okay. And if we see it was a yes, then we expect speed cushions.
Yeah, that's correct. In this case, really, it's just whatever design has been proposed.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So it's 2 months from tonight to produce the construction drawings. Then we have a 6-week open ballot time. So that's another month and a half. So we're looking at 3.5 to 4 months, maybe.
Unfortunately, no.
No.
Should should the design be successful, it will then enter the construction queue among many other successful traffic calming designs.
Okay.
Essentially, during the pandemic, there was a major slowdown, first in the production of the materials and then in the installation of projects, and quite a
Okay.
big backlog built up that we're still trying very hard to work our way through. But basically, right now, a project takes between 8 and 10 months between saying, yes, we do want this to go forward, and then getting around to building it.
All right.
So from tonight, you could expect around a year.
Okay. Okay.
Anything else?
Not from me. I don't know about the others.
Nope,
No, I
all
think
good.
you've answered all the good questions thoroughly. I appreciate you.
Sure. I do want to confirm, are we feeling like the second meeting is not necessary and we should just proceed with the plans?
I vote to go ahead and proceed because I feel like you are very knowledgeable and we asked a lot of questions and I
Agreed.
have a further grasp on it now.
That's
Yeah,
what
I
we're here
don't think a
for.
second meeting is required. I think that we all just kind of want to get this process started as soon as possible.
Sounds good. We will get to it. Thank you all so much for your time tonight. We really appreciate when neighbors come out and kind of let us know how they're experiencing their neighborhood. We do want to make sure everyone's aware. Traffic Calming has a website, TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov. That's where we can see a lot of information about the tools, other designs, and then ultimately those ballot results. And then they also have social media presence on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of that. But that's all I've got. So again, thank you all, and yeah, have a great rest of your evening.
Well, I want to thank you and I want to thank my neighbors for helping me and coming down and getting this set up on my phone so I could be a part of this because I'm not very tech savvy. Um, not stupid, but I am retired and, I'm just saying. So I appreciate everyone's efforts tonight.
Of course.
No problem, Mary. You guys have a blessed night.
Thanks, you
Ciao.
too. Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving, all.
Happy Thanksgiving.